Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 2000's Represent. We're still in our cycle of 2003. We're talking about a movie on this episode. In this episode, we're talking about Kill Bill Volume 1. So I saw this when it first came out. I saw it again on DVD. I actually have the DVD right here. And then a couple years ago, I had the pleasure of seeing this at Quentin Tarantino's New Beverly Cinema in LA. I've been to that theater a handful of times. I've seen a bunch of movies. They play a lot of his films, a lot of other kind of cult hits, and just classic films. So I've seen Evil Dead 2 there. I've seen obviously Kill Bill Volume 1. The first movie I saw there was From Dusk Till Dawn. That was back in 2021. Saw a couple martial arts films, a couple kind of cheesy like horror films as well. And it's just an incredible theater, and everything is on film. It's all kind of it's just an incredible experience. And recently, a local theater played a double feature of Kill Bill Volume One and Kill Bill Volume Two back to back, and it was incredible. It was like 4.5 hours. There was an intermission between films, so normally on these series and the 1990s series, I don't kind of announce what I'm doing for like a future episode right away. But in this case, when we get to 2004, we will be so in like the next like few weeks. Once we get to that, once we finish 2003 and jump into 2004, we will be covering Kill Bill Volume 2. So that'll be the first movie we cover in 2004 because I actually have both Volume 1 and Volume 2 on DVD. And most recently, back a few months ago, that local theater did a double feature of both of these movies, and it was awesome. It wasn't the whole bloody affair cut of the film, which is basically Tarantino took both films and recut them to be one complete film. So it was just Volume 1 and then Volume 2. I think occasionally he plays the whole bloody affair at the New Beverly Cinema, and I think he recently opened a new theater in LA. And I think they were at one point recently showing the whole bloody affair as well. I haven't seen the whole bloody affair, but I hope to maybe see it someday. Hopefully someday he puts it out on like streaming or DVD or Blu-ray or something. But in this episode, we're talking about Volume 1. And I have my notes here for this movie, and we're going to get through the notes and then get to our plot and all that kind of stuff. So let me get my notes here. So Kill Bill Volume 1 was first released October 10th, 2003. It was originally planned apparently as one film. However, it would have been over 4 hours long, and then they decided to split the movie into two volumes. And that way it didn't have to have any kind of stuff get cut for like time constraints. I'm sure there were scenes that were probably filmed and then like not ended up not making it into the final cut of the movie. But all the scenes that he wanted to include in these films are in each of these because releasing it as two parts, he didn't have to cut anything for like the sake of time or anything like that. The second volume would come out 6 months later, so it came out in the spring of 2004. And it's interesting because each of the films feels like a completely different film when you watch them, even when you watch them back to back. Like, Volume 1 is more of a martial arts action film and kind of plays into a lot of the kind of 1970s exploitation films, while Volume 2 feels more like a character study of particularly the bride and particularly Bill, but other characters as well. And it almost feels more like a western. Like, it definitely is, the action is definitely dialed way back in Volume 2. Volume 1 has like tons of action. Volume 2 does have some action, but it's a lot less than Volume 1. And it's just totally, they are very kind of different movies. So I'm glad that they released them as two parts. I think for the sake of his filmography, it's considered to be, this story is considered to be one movie because he's gone on record and saying he's going to direct 10 films and then step away from directing. Like he was going to do, I think it was called The Movie Critic, and that was I believe written pretty much ready to go, and kind of like last minute they canceled the film. So that is not going to happen. At least Tarantino's not directing it, but I believe the Netflix has is working with David Fincher, I think, with a script from Tarantino for I believe that film, and they are going to produce that for Netflix. Probably, if he does a temp film, he's probably going to want it to be absolutely perfect because I think he is completely serious about like doing 10 and being done. He's already kind of moved into writing books. Like he did a book for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Basically did the novelization for that, and then he wrote another book called Cinema Speculation, I believe, which was all about just like films and like stuff like that. So that movie critic is not happening. But and then I don't know where I rank the Kill Bills in his overall filmography. I think my top three, and the order of this may change depending on my mood, but like my top three Tarantino films are Pulp Fiction, Inglorious Bastards, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I don't necessarily know if that's the order I would rank them in. To me, I think then after that you could do like Reservoir Dogs and maybe Kill Bill. I kind of rate the Kill Bills kind of in the middle, while I put something maybe like the Hateful Eight kind of toward the back. Even though I really like the Hateful Eight, it's definitely not my favorite. Hateful Eight and Django are probably like my two, like if I had to choose, like say like least favorite Tarantino's, it might be those. Jackie Brown I think is pretty good, but that's kind of on the lower end for me as well. Let me see here. So we talked about the basically is a kind of an homage to martial arts films as well as exploitation films. It's really cool that Tarantino can take kind of do an homage to a genre, but then completely make it something that is entirely a Tarantino film as well. So it's not just like this is a this style of movie done by Tarantino. It still has all of the qualities of a Tarantino film, like the out of order filming, the just clever dialogue. I love how he writes conversations with characters and things like that. The title cards which pop up like at the various chapters. So he hits all of the hallmarks that he normally does in his films, as well as taking kind of like an established genre and kind of doing his own kind of twist on it. And speaking of that, I believe this movie, if you know any of like the Tarantino kind of lore, there are I believe two kind of universes for his films. There is the realer than real universe, which, from what I read, is the kind of the R. It's basically our world. It's a little more dialed up, a little bit more violent. That is kind of like his version of the real world. And then there is what's called the movie universe, which essentially is the easiest way I can explain this is the movies in this kind of universe are the movies that the characters from the real universe would go to. So like Vincent Vega from Pulp Fiction would maybe go and see Kill Bill. He would maybe go and see From Dusk Till Dawn. So the characters in the real world would go to the movies and watch these movies. And I actually have a list of. Let me actually just bring this list up. I don't know if this is exactly comprehensive, but the realer than real universe features. I have not seen this film, so it's my best features my best friend's birthday. I think is a let's see, a black and white. That's kind of like an amateur film from Tarantino. So there's my best friend's birthday, which is in the realer than real universe. Then the other films in that universe are Reservoir Dogs, True Romance, Natural Born Killers. I mean, he just wrote that. He didn't direct it. Pulp Fiction, Inglorious Bastards, Django Unchained, The Hateful Eight, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So basically anything that could take place in the real kind of world is set in that universe. Sometimes it's like alternate history, like Inglorious Bastards, Django, The Hateful Eight. Even though The Hateful Eight, you can kind of argue could have been an actual thing that happened during that time period. Same with Django, but some of them like take liberties, like Inglorious Bastards definitely changes up some of the history, and so does Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But then once we move into the movie universe, again, these are not all directed by Tarantino, but these are movies that like he has kind of been involved with in some way. Those films include From Dusk Till Dawn, From Dusk Till Dawn 2, and From Dusk Till Dawn 3. So I haven't seen the other two From Dusk Till Dawn. I think those were kind of like, some of them were like direct to video, I think, like that. And then Kill Bill Volume 1 and Kill Bill Volume 2 are in this universe as well as Planet Terror and Death Proof. So like Death Proof might be a movie that like the bride would watch or something like that. All right, back to our notes here. So that is kind of like a distinction to make between certain Tarantino movies. Some are set in essentially the real world. Some are kind of like a fictionalized version of the world where characters in the real world would watch them, if that's kind of the easiest way to explain it. Apparently, the character of the bride was conceived during the production of Pulp Fiction. So him and Uma Thurman kind of came up with the character at that point. And then it was, like several years later where they actually kind of like fleshed the character out a little bit more. And I didn't know this next fact until the screening that I saw a few months back so Inglourious Basterds was actually developed, or like in development as far as like the story and characters before Kill Bill. They came up with the character of the bride and then kind of went on to work on other films. They did Jackie Brown, and then they did Kill Bill came after that. But the character of Shoshana, which was created for Inglourious Basterds, had a lot of characteristics that would eventually be given to the character of the bride, and then Shoshana would get kind of rewritten to be a little bit different. So apparently in Inglourious Basterds, at least in an original like concept of it, the character of Shoshana, she's the one that's in the beginning of the film that escapes the kind of farm from, I think Hans Landa is like looking for her. She's the one that runs the movie theater in Inglourious Basterds. And she's part of the plot to kind of burn down the theater where they're premiering the kind of war film near the end of the movie. Anyway, so she had a list, like a hit list, essentially, that was kind of various Nazis that she was trying to go after. So she would go after them and had like a list, like a list that she would cross off names of as she would take them out. That trait eventually got written out and was given to the character of the bride instead. Because the bride has a list of all of I think it's the Deadly Vipers Assassination Squad. So it's got Bill, it's got like Orad Ishi, it's got like Ellie Driver, and as she's taking them out, she's crossing them off on her like hit list. So then eventually, those characteristics were then given to the bride, and then they kind of rewrote the Shoshana character to what we got in in Inglourious Basterds. Apparently, there was talks about having Warren Beatty play the character of Bill, and I think Tarantino said they kind of needed more martial arts training and things like that. So that's why they eventually went with David Carradine. I think Warren Beatty, if it even got to that stage, would say he would have turned the role down because I think like he didn't really want to like do the scenes where they were like in China or anything like that. And also like David Carradine is like a perfect like cast perfectly in both of these films, particularly Volume 2. He really shines in that one even more so than in Volume 1. But we're now going to I'm going to take a look at the soundtrack first because the soundtrack to this movie is also really good. Let me just bring up Kill Bill thing. Let's see. So the soundtrack to this film is excellent. Tarantino always has kind of like banger soundtracks for his films. I remember picking up the Pulp Fiction soundtrack like a day after I watched the movie back in like 1995 or whenever I first watched it. But the tracks on this album include Bang Bang, My Baby Shot Me Down by Nancy Sinatra. That song is kind of synonymous with the film as it plays over the opening credits. We have That Certain Female by Charlie Fellers. The Grand Duel by Louis Bacalov. You have Twisted Nerve by Bernard Herrmann, which is the whistling that Ellie just like the way like that character whistles that song is incredibly terrifying. Then we have on the soundtrack we have some audio bits. Tarantino likes to throw these audio clips into his soundtracks as well. We have Queen of the Crime Council, which is dialogue with Lucy Liu and Julie Dreyfus. We have the Ode to Oren Isi by the RZA. We have Run Fay Run by Isaac Hayes. We have Green Hornet by Billy May. We have Battle Without Honor or Humanity by Tomashi Hotai. And yeah, I think that song particularly, at least for me, that was the soundtrack is kind of what put that song on the map. And I remember like in the mid 2000s that song kind of being everywhere after that movie came out. We have Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood by Santa Esmeralda. We have Woohoo by the 5678s. We have The Crane and White Lightning by the RZA. Flower of Carnage by Kazu Kokai, or actually performed by Miko Kaji. And that song is great as well. Then you have The Lonely Shepherd by George Zamir, or George, Jheorge, I guess, or George Zamir. Your Wicked Life, which is dialogue between David Carradine, Uma Thurman, and Julie Dreyfus. That's kind of the toward the end of the film. We have Ironside and an excerpt of that by Quincy Jones. I think that's I think Ironside might be the whenever the bride sees one of the people that she's going against, it has that kind of like that audio cue where she's kind of like then like locks in and like goes to war with them. RZA also did another Yakuza 0-1 Banister fight. There's a bunch of like sound effects that the RZA kind of did, which are the flip sting, the sword swings, and the axe throws. So the soundtrack to Volume 1 is just incredible. It's like a Tarantino has this way to just take songs that don't really even fit the genre of the film and makes them work in the context of the movie. I remember like Django Unchained has some hip hop stuff in it, and it actually just like worked perfectly with what he was trying to do. So even stuff that is kind of like not necessarily in that genre, it all just kind of works. All right, so we got to the soundtrack. We're now going to get to the plot. So, like a lot of Tarantino films, the movie is presented kind of out of order. So, beginning of the film, you have basically a bloodied bride. It's black and white, and she is like Bill's like, "Do you find me sadistic?" And he like it's a scene where she's like, he's like, "This is me at my most masochistic," and he basically she's like, "Hey, it's like Bill, it's your baby," and then uh, Bill shoots the bride, presumably thinking he's killing her, but like she ends up being in a coma. But then it cuts into the credits with again Nancy Sinatra with "Bang Bang My Baby Shot Me Down," and then it opens up after the credits. Opens up in I think it's supposed to be Pasadena, and the bride is at the house of Vivica A. Fox's character. She goes in there and she opens the door, sees the bride. That audio kind of I think it was the clip of the excerpt of Ironside goes off, and they have a knockout, bang out fight in the living room, and it spills into like their house, into Vivica A. Fox's character's house, which I think was it Copperhead? I think was the snake that she was named after. But they have this fight, and they immediately put the fight on. It's a great wide shot because it has the picture window, and you see them fighting, and then you see a school bus drive up and drops the kid off, and the kid and they pause the fight because this character's daughter. She lives here. Comes in and she's like, "Oh, what happened?" She's like, "Oh, that dog of yours acted a fool, and I got to put him upstairs." So the daughter goes upstairs, and then they have a conversation. And they're like, "Well, like," she's like, "I like don't think you having a kid is going to like make me be sympathetic to like towards you." She's like, "When do you want me to kill you?" It's like, she's like, "It'll be." She's like, "Do you want to do it like tomorrow, the day after?" And Vivica A. Fox's character is like, "How about tonight? We like meet at a baseball diamond. I coach a little league there. We'll have ourselves a knife fight." She is making cereal for her daughter, and then has a gun hidden in a box of cereal. So, and then I think Uma Thurman's character, the bride, kicks the coffee cup at her because they actually have like a nice, like a somewhat kind of civil conversation in the middle of this fight. And then she throws a knife and kills that character. And the daughter actually pops back up at this point, and the bride is like, "Hey, years from now, if you still feel sour about this, like you know where to find me," kind of thing. And speaking of that, there was actually, to kind of like go to a different tangent here, that was a concept that Tarantino had floated for a Volume 3, was the Vivica A. Fox's character's daughter going, eventually trying to get revenge on the bride. And for a while, the sequel, Volume 3, I think they were even talking about up to like a Volume 4, maybe even some animated like films. Um, it was kind of on and again, off again, and they were talking like some years ago about it being like an animated version, having like different storylines, having characters come back and things like that. And now basically the from the vibe that Tarantino said like recently, it seems like it's completely off the table now. So there was at one point potentially like ideas, or he was kind of spitballing ideas for a potential sequel. That obviously never happened. We get another flashback to the church massacre, and Michael Parks, I think he's playing Earl McGraw again, who is his character from Dusk Till Dawn, the kind of Texas Ranger in the beginning of that film. Um, they go to the church. They find basically everybody in the reception is basically been killed by the Deadly Viper assassination squad. But then they find out that the bride is actually not dead, and she's in a coma. So she goes to the hospital, and she's in this coma for like 4 years. And in this 4 year period, people at the hospital have been basically abusing her. Like there's a guy named Buck who like basically is like, hey, like pay me money, you can come in and like don't want to get really into the details of that. Another quick tangent. I saw this movie once on TV and it was edited. Tarantino films edited they're kind of like it's like what's the point, right? But I remember there's an edited clip in the film. He's like, my name is Buck and I like to. I'm not gonna like say it here, but in the edited version, it's just hilarious because he's like, my name is Buck and I like to party. It's just kind of hilarious. And then the bride repeats that line later when she actually wakes up from the coma. She's like, your name is Buck and you like to. And then it's the bride is like, your name is Buck and you like to party. It's one of my favorite lines of like edited for TV that it's so kind of cheesy that it's just kind of classic as well. But anyway, so she's in a coma for several years. She eventually wakes up from the coma and realizes that like she's no longer pregnant, so she's obviously she believes her daughter is dead, and she hears people coming, so she goes. Actually, sorry, rewind. Elle Driver's character goes into the hospital and is planning on killing the bride in her sleep, like just like it, like basically like euthanizing her in her sleep. Bill calls her and he's like, "Hey, like we owe her more than this. You know, like it's basically dishonorable to kill her when she's basically in a coma." And Elle Driver's character, played by I gotta bring the cast list up here. We're on the soundtrack still. I think, let me see. Yeah, it was Daryl Hannah. So am I correct? Let me just make sure I am correct with the cast. Yeah, Daryl Hannah. All right, cool. So Bill calls her, tells her to like basically like cancel it. She's like freaks out. So she eventually leaves, and that's when eventually she wakes up, realizes she's not pregnant anymore. Her daughter's gone, dead basically, and here's somebody coming, and she fakes sleep, and it's Buck, and he's like, "Hey, like you can do whatever you want to her. You got like 20 minutes or however long it is." Um, the guy goes in there, shuts the door, and then Buck is about to check, and he's like, "Hey, almost done." And he finds that the guy is basically dead on the ground. He's like, the bride is basically like bit his tongue out. There's blood all over the ground, blood all over like her, the blood all over the guy, and blood all over like her like hospital gown as well. And she is laying on the ground with a knife, and she cuts Buck's Achilles, causes him to fall over, and then she just repeatedly slams his head in the door, asking where Bill is. This guy probably has no idea who even Bill is, but that's when she sees the name tag like right here. She's like, "Oh, your name is Buck," and then she like slams the door even harder because it's like she knows like what he was doing. So she takes Buck's car, gets into the car, and is in there for a while, just trying to, because her muscles have like atrophied at this point. So she's in a wheelchair for a second. She gets into the car and is trying to get her toes moving. Of course, you have close-ups of Uma Thurman's feet. It's a Tarantino movie, right? So she eventually gets her toes wiggling, and then it goes to, and the out of order thing is here after she kills Vivica A. Fox's character. You see, there's a name that already crossed off the list. Already, he's already been crossed off. So prior to that scene, if you were to watch it in sequential order, the kind of end of the movie, or near the end, where she's dealing with Lucy Liu's character, happens first. But she eventually goes to, I think she goes to Okinawa. So she takes a trip to Okinawa because she needs to get a samurai sword. She goes to a restaurant, and the restaurant is run by Hatoro Hanzo, who used to make swords and has kind of sworn off making swords due to he's like I took a vow years ago to stop making weapons that kill people. So she eventually, he's like, well, I'm going to go after one of your former students, and he writes on the he's like he realizes who it is. He realizes that it's Bill. He actually writes Bill on like a window, like where like it's steamed up. He's like, so then once he realizes, basically as a way to kind of like, he's like, hey, the guy who murdered me, or at least attempted to murder me, is still around, and he was one of your students. You kind of have. She's like, you're kind of responsible for some of this, so you need to make me the sword so I can get rid of him. So he makes her the sword, and then she goes off to, I believe, to Japan to get Oren Isi. Backstory of Oren Isi. Oren Isi's character, they do a whole like anime sequence with Oren Isi's backstory, where she is Japanese American, and then her parents get killed by the Yakuza, so she ends up like becoming an assassin to take out the people that killed her parents, basically, and then has risen to the top of the Japanese kind of like crime syndicate. And a lot of the kind of traditional Yakuza members are not pleased with this, or at least one of them is very vocal about it. So there's a meeting, and this is one of my favorite scenes in the movie. There's a meeting with all these kind of Yakuza like bosses, and one of the people is not having a good time. Everybody else is having a good time, and the guy he's like, "Why are you so upset?" He's like, "Why?" He's like, "You're putting like this." He basically is like, he's like, "You're putting this Japanese American person in charge of this like crime syndicate. This is outrageous. This is ridiculous." And he's just going on and on and on about it. And Lucy Liu jumps onto the table, runs across, just pulls her sword out, and like cuts the guy's head off. Like runs across, like just cuts it off. And everybody at the table's like what's going on? There's like one guy who makes like a crazy expression like that. And then one of my favorite bits in the movie is she basically like very calmly starts talking to the other members of this crime organization. And she's like, hey, if you ever have any issues with any level of my like plans, just let me know. Just be respectful. And like, she's like, no subject will ever be taboo except for the subject that was just like under discussion. So she starts off very calmly, and then by the end of the like this like sentence, she's just screaming. She's like, the price you pay for bringing up either my Chinese or American heritage as a negative is I collect your head. Just like this guy here. He's like, if any of you guys got anything to say, now's the effing time. It's like just a great scene. There's another great henchwoman by Gogo, who is like totally psychotic. Her character is amazing. But the bride basically tracks down Oren Isi to this restaurant, and Oren Isi's got like her whole gang of like the crazy 88s. It's an incredible sequence. But she goes there and goes in, and basically like they're having like a big party at this restaurant, and the bride kind of sneaks in and is in. I think she's in the bathroom, and the thing that sets her off is she knows. I think the character's name is Sophie. It's Julie Dreyfus' character, and I think her ringtone is like, is it All Them Sing, the song you play on New Year's? That plays because I think like that she remembers like hearing that ringtone like during the wedding, which I think they actually reference that in this movie as well as maybe even the next one. But she knows Sophie's there. So Sophie's walking out into like this restaurant, and the bride just comes by, takes a sword, swings, and cuts her arm off. And there's blood just spraying everywhere. The character obviously would have probably like bled out and died, but didn't. And she's like, "Hey, Orodisi, I'm here to deal with you." Orodisi then like summons some of her like minions to go after her, and she kills the bride, like easily dispatches like a bunch of these minions. And then you just hear a lot of like footsteps, and the line I think like Orodisi says is like, she's like, "Silly rabbit, did you think it was going to be that?" She's like, "That easy?" And the bride is like, "Yeah, for a second I kind of did." And then the crazy 88s come in, and it's just this whole sequence where she's fighting a whole bunch of them. I think it might be volume 2 where like Bill's talking to Bud, I think, who's played by Michael Madsen, who sadly just recently passed away. Um, but he has more of a role in the second movie. But they're talking about the Crazy 88s, and they're like, yeah, the Crazy 88s. There's not even 88 of them. Like, I don't know what's going on there, something like that. But she dispatches the Crazy 88s, and then has the kind of final showdown with Oren Isi in this Japanese garden. It's a cinematography in this scene is just brilliant. You got this water fountain that's like it goes. It's just like so. Water comes in, it makes it fall, dumps the water, comes back up, dumps more water, and just like that sound effect of that is great. The wide shots in this battle are great. They have a very great like sword fight, and at one point, already he's like what kind of sword is that? She's like it's a Hotoro Hanzo sword. She's like, oh, you lie, and she flashes the bride basically flashes the sword to her with the Hanzo look like symbol on it. They have their fight, and the bride gets kind of messed up, kind of banged up, but lands the killing blow on Orenisi, like cuts her like scalps her like right here, and then as she gets cut, Orenisi is like, oh, that was a Hatoro Hanzo sword, falls over dead basically, and then I think like there's a like before this fight, there's a line of the bride is like, leave with like she's like anybody that's still alive after the huge fight. She's like you all are free to go, but like any limbs that I've cut off, leave there. Those are mine now. And she's like, except for you, Sophie. I got something. She basically after already she's been dealt with, she takes Sophie, gets a bunch of information out of her. It's a kind of like I want him to know that I know. I want him to know what you know, kind of thing. And she takes her, dumps her off at a hospital, like literally just rolls her down a hill. And then the big twist, obviously if you haven't seen Kill Bill, I don't know why you're watching this, but the big twist is Bill is now talking to Sophie at the end of the movie, and it's she's like, why do you think she kept you alive? And she's like, well, like she probably wanted like this, and this, and then like, and then Bill is like, hey, Sophie, does she know that her daughter's still alive? That's the end of the film. So, and then that is all addressed in Volume 2. But yeah, Kill Bill Volume 1 is just a like a fantastic film. Like I hadn't seen it for quite a while before I saw it a couple of years back when I went to LA, and then like I said, most recently a few months ago saw that double feature, and I think that was when I was getting this series. Like maybe not even. I don't know if the 2000 series was even started then. I was definitely in the concepting, like doing like planning it out, but I wasn't planning that far ahead. And I'm like, as soon as I saw Volume 1 and Volume 2 back to back, I'm like, okay, I got to do those for this series. So I think that is going to do it for this episode. Remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll see you again in a week from now with a video game from 2003 before we jump into 2004. And again, once we get to 2004, we will be covering Kill Bill Volume 2 to kind of piggyback off of this one. But again, that's going to do it for now. So thanks again for watching. Take care and have a good one. See ya.